Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new deep dive into the future of energy.
Okay.
We're talking renewables, global goals, and we are going to be dissecting a pretty important report fresh
Yes.
off the presses from the International Energy Agency,
Right.
or IEA as the cool kids call them.
They do this report. Renewables 2024 is our guide for today.
And it's a juicy one.
Yeah.
Think of it this way. The world decided at COP28
Yeah.
that we need to triple global renewable energy capacity by 2030. Ambitious, right? So this report digs into how realistic that actually is.
Ambitious is putting it mildly. What's fascinating is that the IEA report doesn't sugarcoat things. It's surprisingly optimistic, but there are some really important caveats we need to unpack.
Okay, so hit us with the good news first. How much growth are we actually talking about?
Get this, the IEA predicts global renewable capacity will grow 2.7 times by 2030.
Wow.
It's almost 25% higher than what individual countries have pledged in their own plans.
So we're exceeding expectations. That's got to be good news for anyone worried about climate change, right?
It is. And a large part of this positive trend is driven by pure economics.
Okay.
The cost of solar and wind energy has plummeted, making them competitive with and often even cheaper than fossil fuels.
So not only is it good for the planet, it's good for your wallet. Sign me up. But earlier you said surprisingly optimistic, which makes me think there's a catch.
There is, and it's a big one. Even with this impressive growth, we're still not on track to hit that ambitious tripling target set at COP28.
Ugh, there's always a catch. So what's the holdup? Not enough sunshine.
Actually, the IEA report goes beyond simply stating the problem and offers some potential solutions.
Right.
One fascinating aspect is the focus on emerging economies.
Right.
They have huge potential for renewables, but high finance costs are a major barrier to getting projects off the ground.
So it's not just about having enough wind or solar, it's about making the economics work, especially in parts of the world that might not have easy access to capital.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right, and this ties into a bigger point about how this renewable energy transition is playing out differently around the world. The IEA report does a great job of breaking down the forecast by region.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. Some countries are racing ahead while others are lagging behind.
It's more nuanced than that, actually. The report highlights that 75 countries representing a massive 80% of global renewable energy capacity are on track to meet or even exceed their renewable energy goals.
I'm guessing China is leading that pack.
We know it. But that still leaves a significant chunk of the world struggling to keep pace.
Okay, so what's holding those other regions back? Is it simply a lack of sunshine or wind? Because I'm pretty sure the sun shines everywhere.
You'd think, right.
Huh.
But it's rarely about the resource itself. The report points to much more complex factors. For example, permitting delays can be a huge roadblock. Think bureaucratic red tape, slow approvals, that kind of thing.
Ah, the joys of paperwork. Who hasn't been stuck in a line at the DMV, right? But I imagine those delays can really throw a wrench in the works when it comes to building out large-scale renewable energy projects.
Absolutely. And then there's the issue of grid capacity, which often gets overlooked.
Grid capacity, what does that even mean?
Basically, you can have all the renewable energy in the world, but if you can't get it onto the electric grid and distribute it to homes and businesses, it's useless.
So it's like having a high-speed train, but you're running it on old rickety tracks. It's not going to get you very far very fast.
Precisely. And in some cases, it's the financial health of the local utilities themselves that's a major obstacle. They might simply lack the resources to invest in the necessary upgrades.
Wow, so we're talking about a whole web of interconnected challenges. It's not as simple as just slapping up a few solar panels and calling it a day.
You got it. And this brings us back to those high finance costs in emerging markets that we talked about earlier. The report suggests that addressing this issue alone could be a game changer. If we can unlock access to cheaper capital for renewable energy projects in these regions,
It's like flipping a switch and suddenly their potential explodes.
it's not quite that simple, of course, but you're getting the idea. And the IEA report actually dives even deeper into some of the less talked about aspects of this transition. For example, it highlights some potential bumps in the road when it comes to solar and wind supply chains, and it also offers a dose of reality about the hype surrounding hydrogen.
Oh, yeah. Hydrogen. It seems like everywhere you turn, people are talking about how it's going to save the day.
Yeah.
So what's the IEA's take on that?
Well, while the report acknowledges hydrogen's potential, it also urges a bit of caution. It turns out hydrogen might not be the silver bullet some are making it out to be, at least not in the short term.
Really? Why not? What's holding it back?
One major hurdle is cost. The report points out that green hydrogen, which is produced using renewable energy, is still significantly more expensive to produce than hydrogen made from fossil fuels.
So it's a classic case of economics getting in the way of good intentions.
Exactly. And even if we could overcome the cost barrier, there's still the massive undertaking of building the infrastructure to transport and utilize hydrogen on a large scale. Think pipelines, storage facilities, the whole shebang.
It's like having to build a whole new energy system from scratch, right?
Pretty much. And that's not something that happens overnight. The report suggests that we're likely to see a more gradual adoption of hydrogen, with its role in the energy mix increasing over time.
So hydrogen, one to watch for the future, but maybe not the instant game changer some are hoping for.
Exactly. But even within the solar and wind sectors, which are seeing the most rapid growth, there are some fascinating dynamics at play. For instance, the report highlights the potential for an oversupply of solar panels in the near future.
Hold on, an oversupply. I thought the demand for solar panels was through the roof.
It is. But the report dives into how manufacturing plays into all of this, and it gets interesting. China is still the dominant player in solar panel production, but the US and India are ramping up their own manufacturing capabilities.
Okay. So more competition in the solar panel market. That sounds like it could be good for driving down prices, right?
You'd hope so, but here's the wrinkle. Manufacturing solar panels in the US and India is currently 2 to 3 times more expensive than in China.
Ouch. So it's a trade-off. Cheaper panels from China versus supporting domestic manufacturing and jobs. Sounds like a tough call for policymakers.
Exactly. And it highlights how this whole renewable energy transition is about so much more than just clean energy. It's tied to economics, manufacturing, even geopolitics. It's a complex web, and each decision has ripple effects.
Talk about a high-stakes game of global chess. So knowing all of this, how do we get to that ambitious goal of tripling renewable capacity by 2030?
Remember the IEA's accelerated case we mentioned earlier. That's their roadmap for making it happen.
Right. They're optimistic but achievable scenario. So what needs to happen? Give us the highlights.
First up, we need faster permitting processes for renewable energy projects. Less red tape, more action. Those delays can really stall progress.
Makes sense. Time is of the essence, right? Especially with that 2030 deadline looming.
Absolutely. And then there's the not-so-small matter of grid capacity. We need massive investment to modernize and expand the electric grid so it can handle all the renewable energy coming online.
No more rickety tracks for our clean energy train. We need those electrons flowing smoothly.
Exactly. And finally, we need policies that incentivize innovation, especially in energy storage technologies. Because as you know, the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. We need ways to store that clean energy for when we need it most.
Okay, that all makes sense. But I have to admit, sometimes it feels like this is all up to governments and big corporations. Like, what can I as an individual really do to make a difference?
That's a great question. And the IEA report actually addresses that directly. It highlights the increasing importance of individual choices, things like installing rooftop solar on your home, choosing an electric vehicle, even making conscious decisions about energy use in your daily life.
So it's not just about waiting for someone else to fix it. We all have a role to play in this energy revolution.
100%. Those individual choices might seem small, but they add up. They influence the market, they drive demand for cleaner technologies, and they send a powerful message to policymakers and businesses.
I like that. Every little bit helps. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here today, but before we wrap up, I did have one final thought. This report seems to focus primarily on electricity generation. But what about other sectors like transportation and heating? They use a ton of energy too, right?
You are spot on, and the IEA report acknowledges that decarbonizing those sectors, especially heating, is essential for a truly sustainable future.
So while we're busy tripling renewable electricity, we also need to be thinking about how we heat our homes and power our vehicles with clean energy. It's like a whole other layer of this energy puzzle.
It is, and it's a huge opportunity. Imagine a future where not only our electricity is clean, but our transportation and heating systems are also powered by renewable sources. That's the vision we should be striving for.
That's a future I can get behind. So for all of you listeners out there, as you go about your day, think about the energy you use, the choices you make, and how you can contribute to this global shift towards a cleaner, more sustainable future.
Because the future of energy is quite literally in our hands.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
That's it for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep pushing for that brighter, more sustainable future.